It's interesting that for many, many years in human history, God did not have a group of people per se, a chosen race of people. There were only Gentiles until finally he had to give up on them. One of the reasons that he gave up on them was because the group in general had a reprobate mind. That's what Romans chapter 1 is all about. He worked with them, and finally it says he had to just give them up. Now, a reprobate mind, and I've said this several times, is defined by Paul there in Romans 1 as a mind without the knowledge of God. It is devoid of the knowledge of God. Perhaps they would admit, maybe there's a supreme being out there somewhere. But it says they don't like to retain God in their knowledge. They don't want to keep on thinking about God and what's going to happen just down the road whenever they die. Now, can you imagine having that on the back of your mind? I mean, all of us had to do that from time to time as unbelievers. We had to lay our head down on a pillow and hear our heart beat and think about the time, as I pass by graveyards, all of those people there at one time were alive, had a heartbeat, were young and vibrant and had a life and did this and the other. But all of them, outstanding testimony to the power of death, all of them were defeated by death and all of them are in the grave, meaning that no one has beat death, and therefore I will not. And so you have to think about that. But because we're all having such a great time, we want to put God out of our mind. But in so doing, God himself is having an action or a response to that. He says, when you do that, I am going to eventually give up on you for having a reprobate mind, which is one that refuses to remember me, who I am, what I'm about, and the reason I created you in the first place, to glorify me, to love me, and adore me. So, God gave up on a group of people, and then he called Abraham to start a group of people. Now, it's interesting that just a few months after he brought this group of people out of Egypt, he gave them something. You know what he gave them? 10 commandments. Now, here is the interesting thing about Israel's theocracy and about the situations we find ourselves in. Those 10 commandments were their constitution. Everybody had to live by that same law. Now, it's different in the United States of America that has religious freedom. People want to worship another god or have no god, that's fine. But if you were in Israel, you had to at least pay nominal respect to Jehovah, or else you would die. Now, they found ways around that. They would worship Jehovah, then they would sneak off and worship Baal and Molech and so forth. But technically speaking, God gave them a constitution to live by, and the constitution was in the form of 10 commandments. Wouldn't it be great if in the United States of America, the law enforcement officials would govern by the 10 commandments? That everybody, all of our neighbors, would be involved in keeping the 10 commandments, which would mean that they would believe in exactly the same God that you and I do. You know, the first common bond that unites us all right here is that somewhere in your lifetime, you trusted Jesus Christ as personal Savior. You believe the witness of God the Father about him, that the Father would save you if you trusted him. And because of that, we are all together here. Aside from that, who knows where we would be or what we would be doing? There would be no commonality. And the first commonality is we have the same God. Now think of a whole nation. Think of the unity a whole nation would have if we'd all start off with that same common belief. And that is the genius about the 10 commandments. God says, okay, if I'm going to have a chosen people, rule number 1, boss is always right. Rule number 2, If the boss is wrong, read rule number 1. That's basically what it is. I'm God. There's no God before me, and that's it. That settles it. What I have to say is what is going to rule this nation. And so therefore there is a genius in these 10 commandments. There is genius as well, in God's genius is seen in the fact that there are only 10. Now 10 is the number of governmental completion. It means that he summed up all of human life in these 10. It's not that there can't be subpoints. It doesn't mean that there can't be more information given, but that everything else in life is founded upon these 10 things called the Decalogue, or God's moral law. Now, we said this morning that God even broke them up into 2 tablets of stone, putting 5 each on 5 commands apiece on each of the 2. Now, it's interesting here. Look at command 1, verse 3. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. So on the first tablet here, God says, here's the first rule, and it is a rule referring to divine life. Who is the one that we ultimately owe our life to? God. Who is the one that sustains us and will keep us alive? God. Who is the one that we should build our lives around? He should be the center and circumference, all that we live for, God. Okay, now what is the 5th commandment? The last one on the list. Note verse number 12. This is commandment 5. Honor your father and mother, that your days may be long upon the land which the Lord gave you. Now, what's significant about this? Well, on the same page, as it were, you have the ultimate life giver and the 2 that gave you what? Your human life. God did not just simply create you as such like he did with Adam and Eve. God involved 2 other people as life givers. And so therefore there's a whole page right here that we have that is centered around life and the importance of life as to origin. The ultimate originator of life, God, and then those that he has delegated it to, our mother and our father. Now we come from this side to the 2 over here. Now you remember that this side has to do with our obligation and relationship to men. This side has to do with our obligation basically to God, because he's the life giver and those that gave us life. Now it's with other people. Because other people now have life, we've moved to page 2. Guess what the very first commandment on this side is? It says in verse number 13, thou shalt not kill. Literally, don't murder. Because God gave them life and 2 other individuals gave them life, we're not allowed to take away what God has given. The ultimate possession of all, life. You cannot take that away. And it ends up with verse number 17. This is the last commandment. This is for the sustaining and the enjoyment of life. This is commandment 10 on the second tablet. Don't covet your neighbor's house, his wife, his manservant, maidservant, ox, ass, or anything that is your neighbor's. So we've got an ultimate life giver, delegated life givers, something that is our personal possession, human life itself, and something that sustains human life. Now, I'm going to stop right here 1 second because of this morning. And every time I get on prices, sometimes I go home and I kick myself. Why do you do it? Why not just preach 3 points in a poem? It would be easier. And I would, but I can't. And the reason that I can't is because my eyes are not fixed on any one given service or any one given person. My eyes are fixed, at least from this point onward, on one upcoming event called the Bema Seat of Christ. And The reason my eyes are fixed there is because, number one, hopefully I want to have a good showing there. Hey, that's what it's all about. But secondly, I am the spiritual leader of a group of people that I am trying to shepherd and feed so that they will grow, so that they ultimately will have a good showing there. And there basically is no other ulterior motives or reasons why I do this. And so sometimes I have to wade into territories that perhaps are not the most popular by way of teaching. You know, we could tell stories like the story I heard the other day of an insurance. Let's say, now how was this? Oh, it was a doctor. He came up and he wanted into heaven. And St. Peter said, "Why should I let you in here?" And the doctor said, "Well, I cured heart disease." And St. Peter said, "Come right on in." And the other doctor died, and he went up to heaven, and he said, "I want in there." St. Peter said, "Why should I let you in?" He said, "Well, I had a cure for leprosy." "Okay, come right on in. You deserve to come in." The other doctor came up there, and he said, "Why should I let you in?" And he said, "Well, I was the one who founded PHC." And he said, "What's a PHC?" And he said, "The Physicians Healthcare." And he said, "Well, what was good about that?" He said, "Well, we reduced costs for the insurance companies, and we didn't want to pay out. And the way that we did that was to just give everybody a short stay." And he said, "Well, I don't know about that." He said, how many days could a person stay?" He said, "Well, the average was 3. He said, "Well, I'm going to have to consult this with the big fellow upstairs, just up the road." And so he went up there and talked to God. He came back, and he said to this fellow, "All right, you can come right on in." He said, "But you can only stay for 3 days." "All right, well, you heard it. I know." So, anyway, now I got to that. I wanted to tell that joke, as bad as it was, because I couldn't remember how it went. But I can never remember the punchline for many of the jokes, except the one I told at first, which was really funny. Okay. Now, here we are. We look at these people, the healthcare people, and we get a little perturbed at them, do we not? Because a lot of times they want to get us in and out of there. No, I'm not talking about physicians and nurses. I'm talking about HMOs, healthcare plans. No. Now see, I'm talking about insurance people. Okay, but they're in the healthcare business, but they want to get people in and out of there to save the insurance company money. And we get a little perturbed because they ought to be a little more sensitive and caring and the like. Oh, this business is saving money and healthcare, we pay into it and so forth. But that is a symptom, and that's why I'm going to try to explain this. As pitifully as I'm doing up to this point, hopefully it'll get better. We get upset for what they try to do, but in actuality, if we look real hard, and I'm saying we, all of us, it is symptomatic of a larger problem of society as a whole. They are just being like us, are they not? In wanting to get by with the least. Now, there is nothing wrong with, first of all, nothing wrong with living life within our means. Not at all. Keeping up on things that we have. Not at all. Being careful with our expenditures and the like. However, our world today, and this is why I brought this out, is involved in coveting. And I mentioned it because the Apostle Paul mentions it as the essential sin. You can do all the other 9, but before you did the other 9, you did 10 first, and that was covet. It is a motivational evil leading to operational evil. Before you did any of the other sins, the first thing you did was covet. Before Lucifer had a violent plan in his heart, he coveted the possessions of Jesus Christ. Before he went up Jacob's ladder and decided to revolt against Christ, down deep in his heart, he was seething with lust over the possessions of Christ that he wanted to have. Now, what does that do? When you begin, here's the verse number 17. Don't covet your neighbor's house, his wife, his manservant, maidservant, ox, or ass. And note this final phrase, or anything that is your neighbor's. Now remember, coveting is wanting to take something from your neighbor that is not rightfully yours, but is rightfully his, and to make it yours. You might not be able to do it right at this moment, but you wish you could, and you would if you could. What does that do to the person that you covet after? Number one, the very first thing, the essential thing, is you cheapen him. What did Lucifer do to Jesus Christ? Well, if he wanted to take away all the possessions and the inheritance of Jesus Christ, what does that do to Christ? Hey, if I take away your bank account, what have I done? I've cheapened you. If I've taken it or stolen it, if I take away your possessions. And that is what the Apostle Paul calls, and let's go there for just a little bit. In Romans chapter 13. And this is why I have made, from time to time, such an issue over this. Because we, of all people, should not be involved or be guilty of this sin. And this is what's happening today. Because our young people, and adults alike, not just blaming them, but our society in general, is looking out there and what do they want? Possessions. For a while there, the schools began not allowing kids to wear name brands to school, whether it was shoes or shirts, simply because young people were killing other young people just to own their clothing. But what am I talking about? I'm talking about covetousness. You've heard about those things. This is about a year or so back when kids were stealing other kids, and if they couldn't have them, they'd kill the kid and take his shoes and shirts because they had a name brand on it. Okay. Now, but what did they do before they had that name brand? They coveted. What gives a person the motivation to kill another person? It is covetousness. It is going to take something from them that they want that's going to better their lives, whether it's their life and now all the gang is going to like them, or whether they've got a possession and a theft or a robbery or what have you. Or it can get down to, and this is the point I want to make, and something I need for us to watch, because I don't want you to get there at the Bema seat thinking you're going to get something when all along you've been out of fellowship for committing, you didn't murder anybody, no, you didn't do this and the other, but you committed covetousness. What is that? Wanting more for less. And that's exactly what covetousness is. And our merchandising industry is driven by that. That's why you always see the sales promising more for less, something for nothing. Oh, if you'll come here, this is what you'll get, and the competition can't give it to you. All right, but now wait one second. You have to remember that behind every product is a face, is a human being that represents a salary and a family just like yours. And in order for you to live, you have to have a certain amount of money coming to you. But in order for them to live, you must do the very same thing. Now, I'm not saying that we do not shop and learn to live within our means by the grace God gives us, but at the same time, This business of covetousness is we're always looking to devalue that individual. And when Lucifer said, I'm going to take what was Christ, why did he have violence in his heart toward the Lord Jesus Christ? And that's what it was. Till iniquity was found in you, it's filled the midst of you with violence. Why did he want to kill Christ? Why did he want to get him off the throne, dethrone him? The first thing he did was to covet, which devalued Christ. Your life, says Lucifer, as far as Christ is concerned, is worthless to me. It's more important for me to get what you have than to honor you for what you are and allow you to keep it. So there is a general cheapening of humanity, and that's the explanation for all the murders. If you devalue life, if you cheapen life, and it's seen across the board in our merchandising, and if we don't want to pay a person for what they're worth, then why in the world don't we kill them over here? Because they're worthless anyway. And that's the point I'm making. That's what the ultimate conclusion of covetousness is. If they are worthless and not worth our compensating them for what they do in life, then why don't we just kill them? And so Paul says in verse 8, don't owe no man anything, but to love one another. For he that loves another has fulfilled the law. Now see, you're holding your place here and going back to chapter 7. Verse number 7. What shall we say then? Is the law sin? God forbid. But I had not known sin. And again, let me repeat. Covetousness is motivational evil. When you look at something and you want it, and it is the driving force of your life, you're going to get it come hell or high water. If you've got to, by hook or by crook, if you've got to lie about it, if you've got to kill for it. And that's what is happening. And that's what he calls sin here. I had not known sin, the essence of sin, but by the law, for I had not known lust. Now, lust is the chief characteristic of the old sin nature. Whatever trend and blend you have, it is still all lust. And I had not known this, what was causing me to do these things, except the law had said, thou shalt not covet. So he goes on to say, he that loves another, we're back to Romans 13:8, he that loves another has fulfilled the law. And remember, we bypassed Romans 8 there, where it said that the righteousness of the law might be fulfilled in us. So you come all the way down, verse number 9. It includes the 5 commandments on this side, on the manward side. And it says, thou shalt not covet. And if there be any other commandment, it is briefly comprehended in this saying, namely, thou shalt love your neighbor as yourself. Being filled with the Spirit enables you to genuinely love other people the way God wants you to love them, and not for what you can use them for or get out of them. And that's the whole point here. If you're just in it so you can step on it in your rise of the corporate ladder, step on these people and use them. If you're just in it to have them work like a dog without giving them compensation so that you can get everything that they have produced, your end, and treating them like a slave, that is not loving them. And it is the essence of sin, which is called covetousness. Therefore, Paul says, love works no ill to his neighbor. If he deserves it and has earned it, he ought to be compensated for it. Therefore, love is the fulfilling of the moral law. Now, he's not talking here about being touchy-feely, huggy, kissy type love here. He is talking about a love that is manifested in no ill toward them. And so therefore, the moral law demands that you keep all of these, and especially the one in check that motivates operational evil, covetousness. Now let's go to one more place here, Ephesians chapter 4. We were there this morning. Verse 17 of chapter 4. I testify in the Lord that you don't walk as other Gentiles walk in the vanity of their mind. Now, we say we don't like the world system here until we get to the merchandising part of it. Then there's a feeding frenzy. Then there's the vultures waiting for the prey to die, and that sort of thing. And it's not that you do not look for prices that enable you to live within your bounds. That's not it. It is the perception created by merchandisers. If you come here, you're going to get something for nothing. You're going to get more for less. And it's that perception that is the appeal to your old sin nature to violate Commandment 10. Lust. Boy, more for less. Wow. And there we go, off to the races. And you have to be careful about that. Getting all choked up. I'm passionate about it simply because if you're the worker that produced it, I'm on your side. If you produced it and you earned it, and somebody wants the product that you produced, you know what I say to that person? Pay them what they're worth. But there is a do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. And for some reason, that old sin nature seems to crop up, but I'm going to show you what it does. You have your understanding darkened. You're alienated from the life of God, which simply means spirit and truth. If you knew the truth about it, you wouldn't do that. But here's what it leads to. Being past feeling. Does it hurt you in the conscience? Think about it. To having a person perform the work, know the price, and then try to gyp him out of it, or excuse the phrase, Jew him down, or what have you. And you can go to bed and sleep at night knowing that if they did that to you, you'd say, well, wait a minute, that's stealing. Yeah, that's right, that's stealing. You ever hear the phrase, you got it, boy, that's a steal. And often I say, amen. Exactly right. That's just what you did. Because they deserved a fair price. You see, buying something actually is a transaction that involves justice. And giving what is right compensation for a product or for work given is an act of justice. But if you're past feeling and you're giving themselves over into lasciviousness, lasciviousness there. But note the last phrase, to work all uncleanness. Now, uncleanness is what is reflux from the old sin nature into your soul. Whatever commandment you break, it's because the old sin nature has come back and revolted against your will, come back into your soul, and the substance that it produces is defiling to your inner man. You were perfect in all your ways till iniquity was found in the midst of thee. It defiled your innermost part, said God to Lucifer. And that's what it is. It's not just the darkening process, it's the poison that is in your system now. And what does it do? You work all uncleanness, your soul is defiled because of the chief characteristic of the old sin nature, covetousness, lust, or here it's referred to as greediness. More for less, something for nothing, and the attempt to do that. Okay, let's go back then to Acts chapter 17. So these are just things to keep in mind as we deal with other people and the services they perform and the products they produce. You have to resist the tendency of the old sin nature to covet. Coveting means working ill of your neighbor, getting something from them that rightfully belongs to them, but you take it, whether it's less for their goods and services or whether it's lusting after something they have, and you work things around in your life to get it. Now we're going to go back to Commandment 1. Aren't you glad? Now only 9 more to go before we're on covetousness again. All right. Commandment 1 is this, and this morning, I looked out in the crowd. I saw whenever I talked about it, and of course I was referring to what's going on north of town here in the and also downtown with the diversity things. And people always get squeamish about when you're talking about other cultures and the fact that those cultures are based and built upon demonism. Now, here is a culture that was based and built upon demonism. Verse number 22 in Acts 17. Well, let's go back to verse 16. Now Paul waited for them at Athens. His spirit was stirred within him when he saw the city wholly given to idolatry. Let's come down to verse number 22. Paul stood in the midst of Mars Hill and said, "Ye men of Athens, I perceive in all things you're too superstitious." You talk about somebody who was brave in the Lord. He was. I doubt that there's any of us here that would go right to the thing that's going up north of town, stand there and say, "See all these things?" I would like to do that. I would have to take my cup of courage. I don't know. "I passed by and beheld your devotions and found an altar with this inscription, to the unknown God, whom therefore ye ignorantly worship, him declare I unto you." Now here was a man, you have to understand what Mars Hill was. Mars Hill was a place where they had all sorts of idols, all sorts of altars. The Parthenon is up there. And again, gods and religions and so forth. They worship their ancestors. They worship demons' gods. They worship the pantheon of gods that the Greeks had. They had gods. Their whole culture was built on it. But he said, wait one second. There's one God I found that you've identified as the unknown God. I want to tell you that the rest of these gods are no good. I want to tell you about him. All of your gods are worthless except for this one. And then he said, verse number 29, "For as much then as we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think that the Godhead is likened to gold, silver, stone, graven by art or man's device." The Apostle Paul, and here is a great thing. People are saying, even some grace people, you've got to win them by going through their culture. Here is the Apostle Paul, who was winning people to Christ by contradicting and opposing everything that they stood for, the worship of many gods. He is not gold, silver, stone, graven by man's device. He is the true and living God of the Bible. Now turn to chapter 19. And verse number 23. Just wanted to bring you in line with what the Apostle Paul did to the 10 Commandments. As he stood there on Mars Hill, what in effect was he telling each and every person who worshiped all of these deities? They're immoral. Thou shalt have no other gods but the one God that created. The rest of them are worthless deities. Commandment 1. At the same time, verse 23, there arose no small stir about that way. That is a synonym for the Christian way of life, or Christians. They were called the way, those that followed the way. A certain man named Demetrius, a silversmith, who made silver shrines for Diana, brought no small gain unto their craftsmen. Now, why in the world did he want to make these things? He was making money. And whenever you see religion per se, they're always in it for the big bucks. And that's true of religion per se. Ours is not a religion. It is a relationship. We go by grace with what God provides. But he called together the workmen of like occupation and said, "Sirs, You know that by this craft we have our wealth. Moreover, you see and hear that not alone in Ephesus, but almost throughout all Asia, this Paul has persuaded and turned away many people. He was hitting them in their pocketbook. Why? Because of commandment number 1. He said that they be no gods which are made with hands. You shall have no other God before me. And commandment 2, no graven image. So that not only this, our craft is in danger to be set at naught, but the temple of the goddess Diana and so forth. Okay, let's go to 1 Thessalonians chapter 1. 1 Thessalonians chapter 1. If anybody would get uncomfortable with that, saying that you would like to tell these people whose very cultures are demonic, you have to take them to Paul, who stood in the midst of cultures that were totally based on idolatry and demonism. Another such culture was the one in Thessalonica. All right? Chapter 1, verse 9. For they themselves show of us what manner of entering in we had unto you, and it involved how you turn to God from idols to serve the living and true God. Now, we believe in cultural diversity. It just simply has to be. Certain groups of people like certain foods, live in different places, dress in different ways, and so forth. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. It's just a difference, a matter of taste. But with regard to religion, we insist there is no such thing as cultural diversity, because there's only one true God, and to say differently is to violate commandment 1. You have no other gods ahead of me as to priority, instead of me as to place. And that is exactly what that means. Okay, let's go back for the remaining moments to Exodus 20. And I want to make another quick comment, and we're done. And the comment that I have to make is with regard to genuine and true love for family and children. Verse number 5 in Exodus 20. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God. Now, there is such a thing as a wrong type jealousy, and there's such a thing as a right type jealousy. And with God, because he is perfect, he has a right to be jealous if we or anyone does not give him the attention and the affection that he alone deserves. Now, that characteristic of God results in this, and note what he says. Visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the 3rd and 4th generation of them that hate me. Now, my comment and observation is this. Around our neighborhood here, we've got all sorts of kids, and it's one of the issues involved in some of the neighbors not liking us with regard to, well, my kids can do anything they want, they can do no wrong, if they destroy your property, so what, and the like. But they do this in the name of love. Because I really care about my children. I'll threaten the police officer. I'll threaten the school teacher. I'll threaten the pastor. I'll threaten any authority figure. If they get a way of having my kids have full rule and reign any place they go. And no one's going to tell them what to do. And I know, because that's what I was told just a couple weeks back. Nobody's going to tell my children what to do. Well, okay. But those same children, while we're having church services, are out playing ball and riding bikes and out doing everything other than what they should be doing. And how in the world can a father or a mother truly love their children when they know that right down the line, just right ahead in human history, God says, I'm going to visit the iniquity of the fathers upon the third and fourth generation of them that hate me. I think because even in some cases that the world today has such a cheapening of life that they really do not love the kids. They simply want to just simply pass the time, allow them to grow up without any interest about what is going to happen in just down the road in the very near future to them, because they were not brought up loving the God of the Bible.